Today's August 10th, 2021. I'm BrentNally, and I'm really excited to be here with the president of Foresight Institute, Allison Duettmann. Allison, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to sync up. It's great that we have matching backgrounds. I'm excited for this.
That's right. Yeah, by accident. Allison, I've really enjoyed joining all the Foresight Institute meetings. The ones that I can't join, I watch later on your YouTube channel, which we'll have linked in the description below. Foresight Institute's YouTube channel, which is growing. It's incredible content. For those who aren't aware, Foresight Institute hosts a lot of biorejuvenation experts, whether they be scientists or entrepreneurs. They let them present for around 45 minutes or so, and then there's normally time for discussion, breakout rooms on Zoom. So I found it incredibly educational and also a great way to network with other longevity enthusiasts in the scientific and entrepreneurial area. So that's just a brief overview of kind of my perception of Foresight Institute and the value that I've got out of it personally. But I think it's appropriate for you, Allison, at this point to kind of introduce Foresight Institute and yourself, how you've changed Foresight Institute as you become the president. So any way that you'd like to kind of share that story would be really helpful for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I guess we can get into the historic bits a little after this, but I think the most important to know is really that Foresight is an institute that tries to push science and technology advances for the long-term benefit of life. So we have a pretty long time horizon, and we focus on three technological areas, which is biotechnology, nanotechnology, and computer science. And so within biotechnology, that's obviously the health extension angle that we take here. And, I know that you prefer the word biorejuvenation, and we can discuss definitions and terms and what to use in a sec. But I think for the purposes of this conversation, people at least know the general direction of the biotech group. Then we have the molecular machines group, which is really focused on the long-term vision of trying to really push progress in nanotechnology to atomically precise manufacturing, which would yield much better materials, which is interesting for energy, medicine, space exploration, you name it. And then we focus on computer science, and here really on decentralized approaches to computing, really with a big focus on computer security, but also lots of work trying to combine the emerging field of AI with the emerging field of crypto commerce to create decentralized computing infrastructure that will allow us to cooperate much better with each other and emerging intelligences and all the other technologies that we want for the long-term benefit of life. So a pretty long time horizon, I guess. And we, I guess, do that via a few specific programs. Most of it is, I guess, more work behind the scenes or off the record, but we are trying to at least outsource a few of our immediately public relevant work via the YouTube channel that you just mentioned. So all of those three programs have their own YouTube channel there. We have a fellowship in each of these areas, and we have specific program groups. So the idea is that we kind of have three premises for our work, which is that much of the really, really interesting work happens on the intersection of that are really transdisciplinary. So we're trying to combine different work in biotechnology, nanotechnology, and computer science with each other. Then the second premise is that much of the really interesting work really is also transnational, right? Like, so it's really, really hard to just find all of the good scientists and researchers that you need in one country. So we really try to open up the channel much more, and that's helped along much by the virtual switch that we had during COVID. And then the third premise is that much of the work really requires transgenerational progress, in the sense that Foresight has existed for over 35 years. I came obviously along a little later, but we have a lot of really, really amazing talent that came along that is more my generation and much younger at this point. And so we're trying to bridge generations so that over time we can create more of a transgenerational community by which more senior folks can onboard more junior folks, and there's a cross-generational learning curve happening in both directions, right? And so those are our three premises, and through those three premises we constructed three groups that are topic specific. So the biotech one, very focused on health extension, the molecular machines group, very focused on atomically precise manufacturing, the computer science group, very focused on intelligent cooperation across different entities. And we used to do technical competitions once a year, mostly on gathering the relevant folks, but then through the virtual switch, we are really focusing on really trying to grow connective tissue so that more long-term collaborations are possible. And so in each of these different programs, we now have groups that are meeting on a pretty regular basis. And as you mentioned, it's a good way for the relevant scientists, entrepreneurs, and really institutional allies as well to network and to grow more connective tissue over time. We have keynote meetings on a regular basis. And then in the next year, we're trying to take the best of both worlds, of the world that we had inhabited pre-COVID and of the COVID world that was more on the virtual. And we're combining the virtual with physical meetings so that we can meet all of the amazing people that we met online in person throughout the next year. And so there'll be more or less like pockets around the globe forming in each of these three different areas where people can have in-person discussions again and hopefully much more fruitful long-term collaboration. So in a nutshell, that's I talk a lot, I guess. There's different bits of how we do individual items, but that's it in a nutshell. Those groups are mostly private. We outsource most of the content online, but there's an application form on the website. So for anyone who's interested in joining the groups as a participant, that may be an interesting one to go to. And we also support fellows in a more hands-on way through our mentors. And so our fellowship applications will be open, in about a month from now for the next year. So by the time that this is airing, maybe not yet, but I would say watch out for that, maybe subscribe to our mailing list. And if you're really trying to push for progress that may still be a little bit too niche for a more general audience to understand why it's relevant, then we may just be the type of niche weird container for you that is able to take those bets.
All right, great, Allison. That was a lot of great stuff in there. I just want to remind the audience, I've already stated, I'll have the link to Foresight Institute's YouTube channel in the description below, but I'll also have a link to Foresight's website, which is just foresight.org, and other social media so that you guys can follow and support Foresight Institute across all social media, which I think is really important. But YouTube is where, all of your great content lives from these great presentations that you host that I mentioned. And you guys are headquartered in San Francisco. So that's where the physical locations are, where you were doing all the great stuff in person that you were mentioning and that you hope to get up and going again soon. Is that accurate, Allison?
Well, so it is accurate to some extent. So we have been based in San Francisco for really most of our time, but now since the virtual switch, we have really expanded our network pretty globally. So one of my collaborators, Lou, she's currently in Europe. And so our next meeting will actually be in Berlin on September 7th, probably. And we're gathering our Europe crowd there, and that will be quite longevity and space focused. So for those of you who are interested in these ideas, maybe that's one to go to. And then, as I mentioned, we're really trying to grow in-person pockets of people that care about radical technological progress on the long run across the world. So wherever you are, there's probably likely a little pocket that is popping up with Foresight relevant work that is next to you. Started really, or kicked off properly by our Vision Weekend, which is our annual member gathering that will be toward the end of this year. And that will be in 3 locations at the same time, which is in San Francisco at the Internet Archive, on a ship and at a rocket company. Then at the same time in France at a castle close to Paris, and on cyberspace. So wherever you are, you can really join this, whether you're in Europe, in the US, or you live on cyberspace. I think that should be interesting for many locations for you to join.
And as soon as there's internet access on the moon and Mars, I'm sure you'll be able to join Foresight from there as well too. And it'd be one of the best places to join from.
All of the plans, yes.
Future plans, right. Okay, well, exciting stuff, Allison. I'd love to hear personally just a little bit about, your personal story about how you got interested in biorejuvenation. Was this something that you you was always interested in from where you were younger, or did it just become more and more obvious as you've studied the world and healthcare and technology? And then maybe weave into that, what were some of the kind of challenges that you had, or maybe none? What was the story behind you coming in as president of Foresight Institute and really shifting the focus to what you've already described at what Foresight Institute's mission is at this point?
That's a great question. So I guess I grew up in Hamburg in Germany, and really, since I can remember, there was definitely a kind of like flabbergastedness. I don't know if that's an English word, but
it is, yeah. Well, I use it.
Yeah, I kind of like I struggle to understand why people were, I guess, okay with being handed an arbitrarily long 80 years long life, and I thought it was actually, like, for a while it was deeply saddening to me. Since I can remember, I it was deeply saddening to me that all of the amazing experiences that we have in our lives, the amazing people that we meet, our family that we love so dearly, our friends that we value so much, all of the incredible things that we can learn will be arbitrarily cut short at around 80, 90 years if you're lucky, really. And so it was really hard for me to grasp how that was not in front of everyone's on the top of everyone's to-do list to figure out. And I guess as a child, it's a little interesting if you find this deeply troubling, and then it is often suggested to you that that is just a thing that you grow up to appreciate eventually. And so I try to just wrap my head around that faster, which is what then led me into philosophy mostly, and into existentialism, to try to just come to terms with the fact of an arbitrarily long life and try to create some kind of meaning within that time span. And so I focused on philosophy. I studied philosophy, and then through that, eventually discovered philosophy of science and transhumanism. And I was like, oh, wait, so there are actually people working on the fact that this does not have to, that we don't have to make do with an arbitrarily long end and try to create meaning within those arbitrarily imposed boundaries, but that maybe there is something to be done in pushing those boundaries forward. And that, seemed to me like almost, I finally felt like I wasn't like I wasn't nuts, and it felt like the second thought really that I think I had was like, why so late, right? And I think from reading Nick Bostrom's Fable of the Dragon Tyrant, I think which if you haven't done so, you should definitely read. I think one of the things that they discussed through the fable, and that the emperor, upon finally being able to and I'm gonna totally ruin the point of the story, but upon the emperor basically discovers that there is that it's possible to defeat the dragon, which is a metaphor for aging, and finally gets around to doing so. And so the dragon, after hundreds of years of having claimed the lives of so many millions of people, finally dies. And so then at first, the whole country is pretty happy. And the second thought, I guess, that the emperor has is, why so late, right? If only we had figured this out a little earlier, this would have really saved a lot of lives. And so I guess that, the moment that you discover that something can be done, this kind of incredulity of why really isn't everyone focused on the fact that something can be done, becomes even larger. And I guess, that really made me try to tip in more. And even though I'm not a scientist by training whatsoever, I think through philosophy of science, at least, you can see a few of the needles that have to be moved, in the bits that can be coordinated. And so I tried my very best to get to San Francisco as soon as possible. And I should also say, I think the second realization that you have upon realizing that something can be done is also that there is no life to be had if there is no life to be had for civilization at large, right? Civilization, I think we tend to think in our own individual local view, at least as kids, that civilization would just prevail and we will continue to exist anyways. And then I think, a little later, you kind of grow up to the fact that that's not a given, that there's a lot of existential risks out there that we should really wrap our head around. And again, this kind of incredulity that this isn't on everyone's minds is also really strong, I think, in that regard. So I think that I think the kind of like the wish for a personal health extension for you and everyone that you love extends on a really deep level to life itself. Life is amazing, and just like we have just begun figuring out our own ways to extend our own personal health, I think as a civilization and as life itself, we have really only just tapped into how incredible it is to be intelligent, sentient agents in the world. And we have just tapped into the possibilities that may lurk around the corner with space exploration, with mind uploading, with all of the other incredible bits that may be at our hand, if only we don't destroy ourselves first. So I think this wish also for prolonging life on a really rudimentary basis, on letting the incredible project that our ancestors have created for us continue, is, I think, a really a really big motivating factor for me as well. And Foresight combines both of them. So it's trying to really push for health extension for individuals, and it is also really trying to push for a much longer, much more flourishing future for civilization and life itself. So the two really converged and spoke to me. And so I found them as I was doing my master's thesis at the London School of Economics on AI and AI philosophy. And both of those factors, Foresight really pushes both of those buttons. So I just reached out to them and cold emailed them and got invited over to San Francisco because it's so close to London. And then I kind of clinged on and started really volunteering, started over time working myself up. I became a program director, researcher, and then since last year, the president of the organization. And it's a tremendous joy, honor to be, I think, to be trying to help coordinate efforts a little bit, because even though it often seems from the distance that it's very hard to see how to plug in, I think once you do a little, it's almost incredible that there aren't more people working on this, because there's still a really big shortage of talent in most of the areas that are relevant for a flourishing long-term future. So if you are in doubt whether you can make a difference, you probably can. And so I encourage you to just get in touch and try to find your place in this quest.
Beautiful, Allison. That was very eloquent. The only thing there for the second half of the question is, so was there like a lot of challenges for you in becoming, president and changing some of the focus and the mission and maybe the other aspects of the Foresight Institute, or was that kind of already wheels already in motion? What's the general story there?
Well, so I thought that Foresight cared somewhat about longevity, which got me excited first. I had no idea how much it cared about longevity.
Until you became president and stepped in and started kind of asking questions, or was this?
No, it was really since its inception. I know that that's the interesting bit about Foresight. I think that there is very few information public. Basically, the interesting thing is that Foresight really has existed for over 35 years. So we were one of the early, at least nonprofits, with actually a website online. So I really had a lot of time and opportunity to dig down into our archives and to find out just really the incredibly ambitious visions for humanity that this organization has been pushing for so long, before even many of the technologies became as within our grasp as they currently are. And so one of the things that I discovered is that many of our members, and so many of them even have been around since those early days, have been signed up to cryonics, which was always a real interest of mine, but which I thought, was really just a little bit, too esoteric for organizations to really be pushing for. And as I discovered Foresight and as I saw how many members are signed up, I really just, it really confirmed to me that there's something there, and that I think the interest in health extension within Foresight has been really strong for a really long time. I think I should also say that the book that led to our founding, the book that led to our founding, Engines of Creation, is talking about molecular nanotechnology and the long-term promises of that. In relation to space exploration, in relation to longevity. So that's a very, very big angle of nanotechnology. To me, nanotechnology and the work that we are doing in the molecular machines group is really, I think, promising for longevity in the next 10, 15 years. And hopefully the kind of like the more entrepreneurial mindset that we currently have in our biotech and health extension group will be part of our molecular machines group within the next 10 years. So like all of the technologies that Foresight is pushing for, even computer science, right? Like computer science, like the main benefit of that is you can speed up progress in all the other technological areas that are crucially important for progress, especially on health extension, right? So no, it has definitely been a focus of Foresight, as I knew from the start a little bit, but I had no idea how much. Even if you go back into our archives, you will find that in our member gatherings from really 20 years ago, there's one part where there's predictions being made on the long-term future. And that was, I think, from a gathering of 1999. And even back then, people were predicting on the arrival of cryonics and cryonics being a I think, $1 billion industry. And they were predicting on, escape velocity and longevity and so forth. So it has always been, it has always been a focus within Foresight. And I think really the inspiring thing is that even back then, when the technological landscape was much less promising than it currently is, people already had really high ambitions. And I think we're lagging that a little bit on a civilization level at the moment, which is bizarre because we're much further along on the technological angle. And so that was, for me, I guess, also an impetus to start a project called Existential Hope, which is a term developed by Toby Ord and Owen Cotton Barrett. And it's trying to basically do the opposite than existential angst. It's trying to inspire a hope, a long-term hope for life and for humanity within folks. And so I created a website called existentialhope.com, where people that are interested in the long-term future can go and can self-select into the different areas that are relevant. I think that Foresight personally has, Foresight as a person or body has a strong interest in biotech, in health extension, nanotech, and computer science. But there's lots of other areas that we need to get good at. Space and neurotechnology are, I think, two really, really, really promising ones. And so for anyone interested in those areas, they can go on existentialhope.com and hopefully self-select. But I think we need just a little bit more ambitious and positive attitudes to the future in general. And so Foresight has always appealed on all of these angles.
Okay, very interesting. And I love the inspirational angle that you just gave there of kind of telling that story and not really knowing Foresight Institute's history and the may I call it closet interest in healthy life extension until you kind of did that digging or became part of the organization. And so I just posit to the audience, I wonder how many other closet healthy life extension people or institutions are out there just waiting to be unleashed. And I just personally have this theory that it's going to be just an absolute, floodgates opening in this industry once something big happens. And I don't know exactly what that big thing is. It's probably going to be a series of things. I think you're going to see some big, wealthiest people on the planet start to make investments or donations to big institutions. I think that you'll see governments change their policy on aging and things like that. It might start with governments like Singapore and stuff, with Dr. Brian Kennedy, with his relationship there at National University of Singapore. I don't know exactly, but the point is that it's a very inspirational story that you just told, in my opinion, because sometimes with, as you just said earlier, when you were younger telling your story, we can feel like, we can feel like almost crazy when you're doing life extension research or beliefs like, how can nobody else, or why don't more people like think like this or are interested in these kind of things? At least I know that's how I've thought. But my advice to the audience is, Allison said she's not a trained, scientist with a PhD, neither am I. We're not MDs, but there are things that you can do to get involved. And Allison is just a great shining example of ways that you can get involved and figure out how you can contribute to this movement if you're, if this is what your passion is and this is what you believe in. So that's the encouraging thing I want to say to the audience. And one other thing I like to say in all my videos, you were talking about this earlier, a lot of people still don't know that about 110,000 people on average die globally per day from aging or age-related diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, osteoporosis, things like that. Out of about 150,000 people that are dying on average. And I would personally put COVID-19 as far as mortality into that age-related diseases. Aging is the foremost risk factor for COVID-19 mortality and morbidity. So it's just, in my opinion, one more disease, COVID-19, one more reason that we should be focusing on the true root cause of all of these issues rather than just chopping off another little branch or a leaf or something. Let's get to the root and let's figure this out. I believe it's an engineering problem, and I believe that we can solve this. And it's, as Allison also stated earlier, are you going to really, be older and be on your deathbed, or maybe be older and we do solve the human aging problem completely? Then the next question that's probably going to come to humanity in our mind is, why the heck didn't we do this sooner? It's, if it's possible to be done, then, and it's the most important thing, then we should be focusing on it. And the final thing I'll say right now in my little rant, Allison, is a quick plug to our video that we just came out with yesterday on Lifespan News, which is a story about a paper that was published a month ago, July 5th, by Dr. David Sinclair at Harvard Medical School, geneticist there, and two other economists, talking about the enormous economic benefits of not even just solving aging or reversing aging, but just slowing aging through a drug like metformin. And spoiler alert, their estimates in this paper are $37 trillion benefit to just the United States economy in just 1 year of healthy life extension, and $380 trillion dollars over 10 years in benefits. So if that doesn't, pique people's ears and interests, I mean, I don't really know what will. And again, that's just slowing aging with like metformin. Imagine what the benefits will be if we actually can like reverse aging or reverse aspects of it. So Allison, what are your thoughts about those things?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly with you. I think that, so I think that health extension is interesting on a lot of different angles. First, I want to say a disclaimer of like, not everyone has to care about this, right? It is not about trying to convert everyone to this. If you don't care about this, it's totally fine. You don't have to. It is just, I think, even allowing those that do care to even think those thoughts and to have those discussions and to not be mislabeled, I think, as incredibly egocentric or egoistic. Because if you look at it from a lot of different angles, it makes sense from many different viewpoints. On the one hand, it makes sense really from like a personal interest perspective. It makes sense from an industry perspective for you and folks around you, or it may make sense to you on this angle. But I think a really, really interesting one is also the second one, which is the sooner we start thinking on longer time horizons for us, for ourselves, and the sooner we enable others that are more self-interested beings to enable to think in longer time horizons, the more we also open up the window into the future that people care about, right? So if you care about long-term civilizational progress, if you care about people caring about future generations, then maybe one really good tool to do this is via health extension and via longevity, because even if it's nice to think that we altruistically care for the very long run, if you want to make it as easy as possible, then you create as much skin in the game as possible. And you do that by extending people's personal life horizon, or at least that of their kids or of their kids' kids and so forth. So I think that's the second reason. The third reason really, and this is the really fundamental one that you just touched on, which is even if you don't care about health extension, the fact that aging really is correlated and the root of so many other diseases that we care about, that we currently treat at the very, very late days when it's most expensive, should really make you care. If you care about civilization at large, also about quality adjusted life years, and really good way of tackling this problem. And I think that was also pointed out in the paper, right? Is to treat aging really early. And so I think even if you care just about bringing healthcare costs down, if you care about saving lives, if you care about really quality adjusted life years for people, then I think a really undervalued approach is trying to tackle aging at the root cause. And I think a problem with that obviously is that it's still really early days, and many of the approaches are still in a setting where they're currently being experimented with. And I think that one way to really to really speed up the process is to get a better understanding at the FDA of the incredible benefit that many of those interventions can have. And so that we can then really try to roll those out and roll those benefits out for many more people in the world. And so I think that there's three angles, right, where you should care about this. One is maybe you care about it for your own good. Maybe you care about it because you care about the long-term civilizational future and you want people to have longer time horizons. Or maybe you really just care about the fact of having a really effective way at tackling quality-adjusted life years of QALYs and of making many more people much better off in the here and now by tackling aging at the root cause and at the root of many of the diseases that we care about, but where we currently don't make the connection strong enough that we should be making.
Right. Well, some people don't make that connection, but some people have, and you're one of those people, and you're leading a great organization with Foresight Institute so that more people can make that connection as quickly as possible. I just want to throw out a couple of things real quick. As you've been speaking, these ideas have come in my head, so I want to make sure I get them out before I go into my next questions, which is that from my experience joining the Zoom meetings for Foresight Institute that you have cultivated and hosted, I have seen board members of SpaceX in these meetings focused on aging. I don't join any of the other Foresight Institute meetings on anything other than geroscience, the science of aging. But I've seen, board members of SpaceX in there. I've seen other relatively famous and successful people. And so as Allison has told this story about what Foresight Institute's focus is at this time, I want people to really understand and think about that. And so tying it into a person that I really like, who this person gets some flack on the internet, is Elon Musk. And a lot of people, I personally believe he's one of us when it comes to life extension. And a lot of people give me flack for that, but I have some evidence that I've found from following him very closely over many years. And what Allison pointed out earlier, I'm not sure if everybody fully understands this. I know a lot of people don't understand this about SpaceX and Elon Musk's mission. It's a big thing that drives him, even though he said it multiple times over multiple decades. If Elon Musk is worried about like a asteroid attack, there's been 5 major disasters that scientifically have killed off almost all of the population of life on this planet, and then life comes back. The last one was the dinosaurs about 65 million years ago. So I think a big reason why SpaceX exists, according to Elon Musk, is because if we have another asteroid attack and it kills off all of humanity, we're done. There's no do-overs. So a big mission for Elon is to get, a population of humans on Mars and on the moon, so that if that does happen, that humanity will survive. So if life extension seems too selfish for you, then maybe that's the opposite, where it's like Elon really wants humanity to survive. So with what I just stated there, Allison, do you generally agree with what I stated? And do you feel like that's a big part of Foresight's mission when it comes to the space exploration? Because you've talked about it, but
yeah,
can you share us a little bit more about why the SpaceX the space exploration or space is so important to Foresight Institute, and maybe even to you as well?
Yeah, well, I think, again, I would personally love to go, but that aside, there's a really fundamental reason, I think, why we should, and we're definitely getting a little bit away from the longevity topic here, but it's actually really not, because it's deeply connected. So it's not only an asteroid attack, right? Think very basically of like, okay, let's just like project the development of many of the technologies that we really need and care about out into the long-term future, right? With biotechnology, nanotechnology, with computer insecurities really proliferating and propagating, you will eventually have the ability of a much smaller number of actors being able to cause major destruction up to the destruction of the entire planet, right? Even if you don't take that, even just with the computer insecurities that currently are really like, the basis of many of the civilizational infrastructure that we care about, even just with propagating those out, many of our nukes are in those silos that are that really lack fundamental computer security. We don't have even if it's not computer security, we don't have a stable nuclear situation already. So if you extrapolate all of these technological development out and really see the ability of a smaller number of actors being able to cause major catastrophic events that really affect the whole world. We've seen that with the pandemic now, but like that wasn't even engineered in a way to be like incredibly lethal. So I think we need technologies. Don't get me wrong, we need technological progress. Otherwise, otherwise there's really no way in which we can survive on a very, very long time horizon in the way that we want, in the flourishing ways that we want. But on the other hand, if you extrapolate potential misuses of those outward, you do realize that Earth may not be a safe place for a really long time. So I think space exploration is really interesting on all of these angles, right? It's a way of how to create a plan B for at least a small, small seedling of life that we could have as a backup option for life. And so I think Elon is doing that. And if I would assume that he cares about more than just asteroids impact. I just want to point out there's many other risks that we should be worried about. Why going out into space is a good solution. Maybe if we have a misaligned superintelligence, it won't save us for a long time. But I think for many of the other risks, space is a really good idea. Even if you like, sometimes people bring up mind uploading as another way of just, creating like a backup copy, but those computers exist on infrastructure that is currently on planet Earth. And so we really only have one planet at the moment. So I think for those angles, space exploration is really, really important too, right? If you care about the long-term future of civilization, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on Earth. Of course, we shouldn't mess up Earth. That's also a way in which Elon is often misunderstood. I think he's doing enough to misprove that with his Tesla efforts. But, I think it's fine. Not everyone has to agree with his vision. But I think despite that, people should just let him do. Why don't people care about the government spending billions of dollars on things that no one needs? And if someone's spending their private money to push civilization a little further, suddenly everyone gets upset. So don't really understand it, but it's okay.
Yeah, I completely agree and well stated. And I was selling data storage. So part of that was backup and recovery, disaster recovery about 10 years ago for a company called 3PAR, and we got acquired by HP. So, I'd be saying, hey, your data centers in Silicon Valley, you want your disaster recovery backup to be like in Texas somewhere that's across the country and a different type of climate, so that if one place gets hit by, let's say, a hurricane, or the other place gets hit by an earthquake. But yeah, you made a great point that let's put that all on maybe a different planet, disaster and backup recovery, the second copies on the moon or Mars or something to decrease the probability that data will be lost or compromised. So great point there. So we did move away from longevity a little bit, but this stuff is complex. And I know a lot of people, not just, with doing certain things on social media and YouTube, I get a lot of hate sometimes coming in, hateful comments, not necessarily directed at me, but when at like Elon Musk and stuff for that. So I'm kind of like, guys, like, calm down. He's doing a lot, and he's helping the planet. So in any event, back to the aging stuff, I'm curious from you, Allison, you've hosted fantastic people like Dr. Steve Horvath at UCLA, who's pioneered the epigenetic DNA methylation bioaging clocks. And, other people like Morgan Levine with PhenoAge, who's also pioneered that DNA, that epigenetic clock. What aging clocks are you most excited about, or what do you think needs to be done? So anything that you want to state about the whole science of how we're actually measuring aging, not just in humans, but not just other mammals, but other species as well, like fruit flies, nematodes, worms, stuff like that. Just generally, how important do you see this to be? Because if you don't measure something, then how do you really know? I mean, we can look at something, I can look at you and generally tell right now about how old you are. That's what humans do. That might get weird in the future if our true aging science, biotechnology is realized. But for now, we're pretty good at doing that as humans. But how important is the aging clocks science to you?
Well, it's pretty important. I think, again, for a number of different reasons. I think currently, like, I'm just trying out a few of the different tests that are out there. Carl Pfleger has done an incredible job at compiling on agingbiotech.info a list of all of the current diagnostics available. So if anyone's interested in starting to measure, then I would say that's a really good spot. Within our biotech and health extension group at Foresight, we also offer discount codes to a few of the clocks that we have. mostly by the speakers that presented them. But I think on a general level, it is more, I think, important for the longer term visions of pushing progress on better ways of actually measuring our biological age, because I think we're not really quite there yet. I think one interesting thing for people to do is, if you do decide to take a few of those tests that are currently out there, maybe take them on the same day, because then you can actually compare how you're faring on the different types of clocks, because ideally you measure that not only once but several times on different clocks. And so then you can cross compare your data on different tests. And I think that's, ultimately what we need to do also on a larger scale, which is, again, why my interest in computer science also ties in here, because I think one really interesting thing to do is different people to push progress on these different clocks, and generally on the different intervention that we want to measure, is maybe to combine more work in the computer science field, especially in privacy preserving machine learning, to actually be able to have different people that collect their data by a variety of different tests, actually have a way in which we can cross compare and analyze data from a variety of different tests. So we can actually find out which interventions work for which people at which ages, where and from which starting conditions and so forth. So I think that long-term progress in this field is really much needed. I think we're currently not quite where we want to be, but there's definitely a lot of really fantastic research and a lot of fantastic companies working on this. And ultimately, I think, again, the secondary effects here are also not to be forgotten, which is, during COVID, and I'm not the first one to say this, people have really gotten used to taking tests. Like, there's now a lot of like almost like self-brewed biohackers out there, right? Like, I think I see even the Oura ring, I see with more and more people just like shining their ring in conversations, really on Zoom calls even. And it's really nice, I think, how people are getting more used to just measuring. And so I think once you start doing that, you do see that there's a difference between what you eat and what you measure even. Then I think you start caring, you start to be able to disambiguate your chronological age from your biological age in your head. And they really just become two different things. And you realize that like things that you do actually have an impact. So I think for this effect, it is really important. And that effect has a really interesting secondary effect, which is it's an avalanche effect. It's the collateral benefit of being able to measure is that you get more curious, that you get a little bit less suspicious of the fact that we may be able to accelerate the progress in longevity soon enough for many people that you care about to actually benefit from this. And so I think that the more people realize that they can really turn back their own clock, is also the faster that you realize that we can do something about this process, which will allow more people to have the psychological safety to perhaps wake out of the aging trance and tip into this and to tip into the field a little bit more, get curious, and to start exploring. And the more obviously that happens, the more investment you have, the more companies founded you have, the better tests you have, and then through that, again, more people become interested, and more people jump on the bandwagon. Again, not everyone has to care about this. I don't want to preface this, right? It's not like it doesn't have to be the most important thing for you in your life. If you don't feel that you want to tip in, if you don't feel like you're in an aging trance, I think this is sometimes a little bit almost misunderstood, perhaps, also to say that everyone has to care about this. This is not the case. If you don't, then also maybe you're not listening to this YouTube channel. So
yeah, that's what I was just going to say, Allison. I think especially we're 50 minutes in, I'd say at this point, almost everybody's, if they've made it this far, is probably relatively interested in this stuff. But you bring up a really good point. In other words, we don't have to be trying to convert and pull in friends and family. If they don't like it, like, it's cool, it's all right. There's different types of religions. Some religions try and convert and some don't. I was actually raised, my mom's Jewish, my dad's Catholic. One of those two, I'll let the audience decide, tries to convert and the other one doesn't. So whatever. But yeah, very well stated. I want to just point out real quick, it looks like when you're holding up your hand that you do have an Oura ring. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
So, David Sinclair talks about it a lot. And my wife and I almost yesterday, we got busy, but we're going to buy that we're iPhone users. We're going to buy the iWatch. I've held off and resisted for years, but I see enough reasons from a bio data standpoint to actually go ahead and pull the trigger and do that. And so where my wife and I were currently stuck on is, does it make sense to have both? Like, what is, or do you know, like, what is the value of having an Oura ring that maybe an iPhone or an iWatch doesn't have, that's not available? Do you know that answer?
I couldn't tell you because I don't have the iWatch. I'm very happy with the Oura ring, I should say.
Okay.
Yeah. So
the problem is like each one of these companies and devices, they're all trying to like sell themselves and maybe overmarket, oversell. So it's like they both might measure sleep, but who's actually measuring sleep better? And I've read Dr. Matthew Walker, the sleep doctor's, book, Why We Sleep, and gone down that rabbit hole. And he, at least when I read the book in 2018 and was listening to a lot of his podcasts, he wasn't really recommending a lot of these devices like that as being accurate measures of sleep, for example, compared to coming into his lab at Berkeley and the rich sleep data that they could gather. So that's where I'm stuck with my personal research on that. So I'll just audience, stay tuned. I'll try and figure this out and update you guys when I figure it out. But yeah, in general, your point was that all of these wearables and biometrics dating and COVID tests, we're all just getting more used to this. And this is really good for the healthy longevity life extension community, because it means that people are going to be seeing this as more normal, and they might want to take the next step and actually start measuring other things like their DNA methylation bioage. So Allison, as we've already stated, but just as another quick disclaimer, you're not a trained scientist with a PhD or MD or anything like that, but you do have a front row seat as the president of Foresight and cultivating this great discussion on geroscience, the science of aging. So with that in mind, what are the therapies and the scientists and the labs that you're most excited about, or most excited that you've been able to collaborate with already at Foresight Institute, or that are on your list to collaborate with in the future? So any way that you want to answer the question.
Thank you. Well, that's giving me the very, very hard task to select, and there's an agony. It's really the agony of choice. I also, great disclaimer, I want to make that really, really visible, right? You're probably having a lot of scientists on here. I am really just monitoring and learning a lot and trying to coordinate where coordination is happening. So I'm more the coordinator of really, really, really smart cats at this point, rather than really that I have my feelers in very much in the science and tech. That said, we have fantastic advisors and fantastic people circling through these containers. And so we at Foresight, as I mentioned, are more extensively supporting a few projects that our advisors think are really, really good opportunity to pushing escape velocity and longevity. We are supporting 3 this year via an accelerator-like structure. Foresight doesn't take any share in those, but we're just trying to hook those projects up with more mentors, with funding and so forth. In the next year, this will be a fellowship. And so again, if you're interested in applying this, you're welcome to. This year, we're focusing on 3 individual projects that I'm personally super excited about. It's one, Jean Hebert from the Albert Einstein School of Medicine, and he's focused on brain cell replacement. I'm not sure if you've already had him on. If not, he should definitely be on this podcast.
I need to get him on. He's written the book Replacing Aging. He's fantastic. Yes. He's worked with Aubrey de Grey at Sens. He's just incredible. We have, I think, somewhat of a relationship, but I haven't interviewed him yet. I'm really busy. I haven't been doing enough of my interviews on my channel, but he's fantastic. Please continue.
Okay, well, he really has this very kind of like simple, really premise, which is we can replace almost any part of the body, right?
Well, we've already done it. Everyone except for the brain. There's 78 organs in the body. We've replaced 77 of them. Like, that's a fact. It's been done. So continue, please.
Yes, exactly. And so there's one missing, and he's tackling that one. Really ambitious project, but I think ultimately, if successful, would be of such an incredible impact that we have to get around this. And again, the sooner we start, the sooner we get there. Second one is Daniel Eves from Shift Bioscience, and they basically really identified safer drug targets for cellular rejuvenation. So definitely on target here by applying machine learning driver clocks to cell reprogramming. So really, really, really fantastic program. They just, I think last week, presented to our group. And so they are in a really unique position to do this. And I'm hoping, or maybe you've already had them on, maybe you do so in the future. But
Allison, if I can interject real quick, I was just messaging on LinkedIn with Daniel last week. He's going to be speaking at Indian Age-Related Diseases Conference. Ooh, got to get that plug in. You know, Keith is the president. He's my co-founder at Longevity Plan. He's the co-founder, president of Lifespan.io. They have their big conference coming up, the 20th and the 21st. Indian age-related diseases. Get your tickets if you haven't already yet. And Daniel Eves, the CEO of Shift Biosciences, as Allison just mentioned, will be speaking there as well too. So got to get that plug in. Thanks. So I'm 2 for 2. Let's kick it to you.
Yeah, also definitely that will be a fantastic conference. So I can only second you on this. Thirdly, I can't very much say about this yet. They're not publicly announced it, but they will be presenting to our group shortly. And they are really trying to develop a novel perfusion technology that is capable of fostering cellular repair in organs. And that's useful for a variety of different things. As I think have let shine through earlier in the conversation, I'm personally really interested in cryonics, and I think it's really time to take this up again. I think that, you know, we all obviously are hoping that rejuvenation technologies will just speed up, and that our parents, we can benefit from them, and obviously I think civilization at large. But I think if we can't, we need a plan B. Currently, the best plan B is cryonics, and it is really the only plan B at this point. And so, you know, I think that we need to figure out a way in which we can make this option a much more attractive option, because our parents will very likely have to benefit from this option, and we may have to do so too. So I think that this is something that we cannot miss, and it's really uncomfortable to think about, because it really means thinking about yourself and your body and where it will be stored. It means thinking about the fact of whether you want to do a full body preservation or just a head preservation and so forth. So it's definitely very uncomfortable if to get yourself out of the aging trends to consider this option. But nevertheless, we have to get around. And I think Ralph Merkel said it really nicely. It's like when people point out the small chances of survival with current cryopreservation technologies, he's like, yeah, right. But if you're on a sinking ship and someone throws you a life vest, and even if it's far away and it's a small chance that you will make it through, are you going to swim or are you not going to swim? And so I think ultimately it's a rational choice to explore. If you're not on board with cryonics, I would say read the Wait But Why post on why cryonics makes sense, and it walks you through it. And so I think we need to get better at pushing this area forward. It is still maybe too niche to take on for many organizations. I think Foresight is I think you need to position to do so. I'm pretty interested and pretty bullish about the space. There's fantastic work coming from Europe on this angle as well, with the Tomorrow Biostasis Foundation. And so ultimately, I think we need to tackle this more. Just to throw in maybe just a few more things I think that would be very interesting for people to explore more. One is, I think, really plasma dilution. It's an area that also still is undervalued, I think, for the potential benefit that it could have. There's still lots of work to be done, and I think lots of low-hanging fruits to be picked. And then one especially, I think, interesting one, because it doesn't only relate to the aging field, is really just trying to get more machine learning folks interested in rejuvenation at large. And so this is, I think, a larger effort. But ultimately, I think really the most interesting advances will come from the intersection of different technologies, and especially computer science has a tremendous potential benefit for many of the things that people are currently trying to figure out in aging. So if you work in that area and you don't really know how to plug in, please reach out. We will find a place for you. And so there's a lot of different areas. Some I think are just niche enough and just high risk, high potential impact enough that Foresight can take them on. And if you think that you may have one of these projects in your pocket, please reach out. We do have a fellowship, and I think there are at this point really very few bad ideas, in the sense that we need to try them and weed them out. We're still so early on, and we need new thinking in this field. I think there's a tremendous amount of work happening via the convergence of biotechnology that has really sped up during COVID in an incredible way, via computer science, which again, software development has sped up during COVID in a fantastical way. And really via also, one should note that crypto has had a really big impact on the development on longevity, I think, already. And so I think people who are in crypto, with which I mean cryptocurrencies this time, not cryptography, which is also an interest of Foresight, but people in that field are already used to thinking outside of the box. And so they, I think, are coming into longevity now within a larger effort. So I think that currently we need a lot of different people to coordinate in very, very peculiar ways, and in ways that we haven't done much before, because many of the people have been, I think, used to being at the same agent conferences with more or less the same people for like 30 years or something, at least when I often speak to Foresight folks. And now suddenly there's lots of new interest in the space. And so so please reach out. The space is super helpful. People are willing to board you on. Many people are really willing to spend hours and trying to place people and trying to see where they can have the most impact. And we need lots of different skills. There's lots of political work to be done. Foresight is currently within what we can do as a 501c3, trying to gear up efforts there as well. But anyway, this is just to say, if you're interested in this field and you think that you can contribute in an interesting way, then reach out, and there's likely something that you can really get the ball rolling on.
Definitely. And it's foresight.org /contact. I'll have the link in the description below if you want to contact them. Just a couple real quick things to say, Allison, from what you mentioned there with I believe the Lifeboat Foundation, Eric Klein's organization, might have been created from that analogy that you were given. I'll have to follow up with Eric to see if that was the inspiration for the name of the Lifeboat Foundation. And then due to the plasma dilution, plasmapheresis, you've had both Irina and Michael Comboy at Foresight Institute. You've hosted them at UC Berkeley, where they've done all that research. And then right now there's a human clinical trial going on in Russia that Elena Milova, the COO of Lifespan.io, is participating with, along with other people. So we'll be anxious to see how that turns out. You've also, hosted Didier, or there's the whole thing going on with Didier Cornell donating the money to a couple different labs with E5. And so there's exciting stuff going on there. And then I can't remember the last thing that you mentioned that I wanted to state. So we'll leave it at that. So Allison, this has been absolutely wonderful. I've kept you over time. You've been incredibly gracious with your time. I hope the audience really appreciates it. You're an incredible wealth of knowledge when it comes to these things. I know you're just getting started. Your passion shines through with how passionate you are about all of these ideas. And I feel very gracious to have had you on my YouTube channel. I really appreciate it. The last words are for you, Allison. What do you want to leave the audience with?
If you're not sure whether to care about this or not, read the fable of the dragon tyrant and then maybe decide again. And then my very last words are just thank you very, very much. This has been really wonderful. And I'm super excited about what's currently on in this going on in this field. And I think you're doing a fantastic job at just trying to onboard more people via this really educational channel. And yeah, thanks a lot. I hope you have a fantastic day, and see you soon in one of our upcoming meetings.
Yeah, I think there's one Thursday, 2 days from now. So I look forward to joining, and infinite gratitude to you, Allison, for doing this with me. And I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.